All right.
Good morning, ladies. I just want to come on and first introduce our guest speaker, Jody Wood Putnam. She'll be presenting the Gardening in Florida. We do ask if you guys have any questions to hold them till the end. Take notes. Her presentation is incredibly informative, and we're very happy to have her here. So if we could just all close our mics as well as our cameras just to have the flow go a little smoother with our technology today, that would be excellent. And here we are. Thank you very much, Jody.
Great. I'm very happy to be talking with you all this morning. I am a Bay County Master Gardener. I've been one since 2004, and gardening is my passion, and I love teaching about different aspects of gardening. As a Master Gardener, we work to educate the public on good, sound, research-based gardening practices, and that's what I'm going to pass on to you, a lot of the things that I've learned over the years and a lot of the resources that are available for y'all after today to be able to follow up and learn about other gardening things too. So if you could go to the next slide. Gardening, you probably found out, is different here than it is in Canada. It most definitely is, and there's a lot of aspects that make it different. The temperatures are probably the first thing that comes to mind to people. Our highs are between 63 and 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Our average monthly highs, our average monthly lows are 45 to 76, and I bet in Canada it's a little different than that. One of the most critical differences in temperature here is the minimum temperature that we reach. Here in our area, we end up with a minimum around 20 to 25 degrees Fahrenheit as the average annual extreme minimum low. So that is the temperature, the coldest temperature that we get each year is between 20 to 25 degrees on average. That's not to say it doesn't get colder, and we do sometimes get very extreme temperatures that will get to be 16. I think I was here once where it got to be like 12 or something like that, but it does get sometimes colder than that, but on the average, it's between 20 and 25 is the lowest degree. And that puts us in a plant hardiness of zone 8B to 9A. So if you're looking for plants, a lot of times they'll tell you this is good for zone 8A or 8B or whatever. So those are the zones that you will want to pick plants that will grow in those zones. And sometimes that's kind of an average for areas. Sometimes there's microclimates that you'll have, like if you have a patio that's kind of blocked off from the wind and protected, you may actually be a 9B kind of micro temperature climate in there. So that can be different a little bit too. And also if you're at a place that is right out where you get a north wind out open, it may be a lot more towards 8B or could be almost 8A if you're upper part of the county. But that's generally where we're at. Humidity and rainfall can be different from what you have back home in Canada. It can be higher or lower for various times of the year depending on where you live. Our length of day is significantly different, and that can have different aspects to it. In December, our days get down to like 10.5 hours, and I know up in Canada it's a lot smaller than that, or a lot lower than that. And what that means, though, for us is that we can grow a lot of things in the wintertime because we have more hours of daylight than you do up in Canada. So in the wintertime, we can grow a lot of things that you aren't able to grow. In the summertime, we get around 14 hours, and up north you have more hours than we do. And in that case, you have a super fast growing of vegetables and annuals and things like that, and it's been beautiful whenever I've gone up there in the summertime. I've loved it. So that's a difference too. Our soils are, can be very different than up in Canada. We generally have well-drained, sandy, generally acidic soils, and our insects and our diseases are different here. And they may be insects and plant diseases that you've never experienced up in Canada. And like a lot of the diseases, we tend to have a lot more fungus diseases because of the high humidity we have here. So that's something we tend to have more prevalent. So next slide. So some examples. Tulips. I love tulips. Tulips are great. They're beautiful. When I lived I used to live up in Washington State, and we used to have tulips, and I loved them. And here in Florida, though, you can grow tulips, but you generally grow them as an annual because tulips require 2 to 4 months of temperatures below 40 degrees before they can plant. They'll grow and bear flowers. So you either grow them as an annual or you can trick them. You can buy bulbs and you can either buy them pre-chilled or you can put them in your refrigerator for 2 to 4 months. Those are some options that you have if you want to buy tulips. But you're not going to be able to put tulip bulbs into the ground and expect them to come up year after year like you can up north. Next. Next slide. Yeah. However, this is the good part here in Florida, is this is a plant that has kind of a similar look to the tulip. This is one of our gingers. It's called a curcuma, and these are actually 3 different, I think, well, 2 different species and 2 different cultivars of 1 species. So they're different curcumas, but these guys, you plant them. They have underground rhizomes, and every year they'll pop up, and they're beautiful. And these guys are great in containers also. So I know there's some interesting containers, but they'll die back in the wintertime, and they'll come back, and you've got these beautiful pink flowers. So can't grow tulips, but you can grow curcumas, which is one of our gingers. Daffodils is another bulb that you actually, many of the daffodils that you grow up north will not grow here, but there are some that don't require the same high number of chill hours, and so you can grow them here. Some examples of paper whites and Carlton and Peak Charm and Ice Follies and such. All the pictures here are daffodils, narcissus that have been in my garden, and every year they pop up and they're beautiful. So you can grow daffodils too, but you have to make sure you buy the right variety that does well here. Next. Tea roses. I love tea roses too, and I've got up north and I've seen some absolutely beautiful tea roses, and I've always envied them. Tea roses are harder to grow here because of the humidity, and they're prone to fungus diseases and some other things like that. But you can grow them, and I've seen some people very successfully growing them. One of the keys here, though, is that most of your hybrid teas are grafted, and you need to make sure that when you select a plant that you buy them on a rootstock that does well in our area. And the recommended rootstock for our area is Fortuniana. So if you want to grow a tea rose, you want to look and make sure that it has the Fortuniana rootstock. So next. Another example of differences between Florida and Canada in the garden is that for fruit trees, we're very limited actually to a lot of our fruit trees because we don't get cold enough here. A lot of the fruit trees, they require what's called chill hours. The number of hours below 45 degrees that they have to have before they'll bear fruit. And so what you have to do is you have to buy plants, fruit trees like peaches, apples, and pears that have a low chill hour requirement. And so you have to look at specific ones that will do well here. And sometimes you go to a box store, they may sell you something that requires a higher chill. So you want to do your research and make sure you get the right choice. And I'm going to tell you where you can do that research. So next. On the other hand, there's some more tropical or subtropic fruit trees, such as lemons and limes and oranges and grapefruits and such, that we actually are sometimes a little bit too cold for them. And so you have to choose cold hardy cultivars. So you want to make sure that when you select your lemon or your orange or your lime, that you choose one that that does well in our area, that doesn't that's cold hardy for the temperatures that we can experience. And that's not to say that we might not get temperatures that are really cold and they do them damage. As I mentioned, that average low temperature, sometimes you do get a really, really, really cold winter, and there could be some damage. But there are things like covering them that you can do, if you see something like that coming. So first thing is choose a cultivar that can take fairly cold temperatures, and there's some great ones out there, like Myers Lemon is a really great one. Hamlin Orange is another one I really, really like, but there are some great ones out there. Next, peonies. I love peonies. And that's another one up north that I don't know how, you just can't grow them here. However, there is another plant that I love called the camellia that do well here. So we can't grow peonies, but we can grow camellias, and I take that trade-off for here. But I do love peonies too, but they just don't do well. I think the hot temperatures and the humidity and such, they just don't do well here. Next. And hibiscus. There were a couple of questions about hibiscus. There's a lot of different hibiscus species out there. Some are tropical, some are not. We actually have quite a few. I don't know exactly how many native cold hardy species of hibiscus. Like the one on the right there is our scarlet hibiscus. That is a native hibiscus. It dies back to the ground every year. It comes back up every year. It's a wonderful perennial, and that one is totally cold hardy. It will die back to the ground. It's part of its life cycle, but then it comes back each year. If you look at the hibiscus though on the left, this is one of the tropical ones, and this one is not cold hardy. This is one that actually my husband gave it to me when we were dating, so I've kept it in a pot, and I've had it for 20-something years. And I always take it in every winter because it is not cold hardy. So depending on the hibiscus, you either can grow it or can't grow it here in Florida. So, or there's different ways that you have to grow it. So, okay, next. The good news, because as I mentioned, you need to know to be educated in like what fruit trees and what hibiscus and so forth. The good news is there's a lot of free help out there for you. And the University of Florida Institute of Food and Agricultural Sciences, UF-IFAS, is a state and county-ran organization that has a mission of developing, they do the research of knowledge relevant to agricultural, human, and natural resources, and make that knowledge accessible to sustain and enhance the quality of human life. That is their mission, and they have lots and lots of research-based information that they want to give out to people and make them have more successful gardens and other things, such as they do 4-H and some things with canning and stuff like that, so a lot of different things. So next. So if you want to contact IFAS, we have a local extension office that's located on 14th Street in Panama City. And currently, because of the coronavirus, it is closed to the public. But they are working, and you can reach them via phone, and you can reach them via email if you would like to have specific questions that you would like to have answered that you can't find otherwise, or you just want to ask there. Hopefully, one day soon we'll get opened up again to the public where you can come in. But right now, you can contact the office at either by phone or internet. But there is a computer over the internet source of information. IFAS has what they call Everyday Information Source, EDIS, and they have document after document after document of all sorts of gardening subjects, pretty much anything you can imagine, and all sorts of information that's there, readily available and searchable for you. So next. So, like for instance, I asked earlier if you had any specific questions I could make that I could focus on to know how, what y'all are most interested in. Like for instance, if you have some of these questions on herbs and vegetables, we had one, you would like to have advice on growing herbs and when and how to prune them, how to keep cilantro alive, interested in growing vegetables in pots, wanting to know about lettuce, strawberries, and what seasons they'll bear fruit. Well, you can actually just Google IFAS, and whatever your plant or subject of interest is, and be amazed at the great information that comes out. So, for instance, if you are interested in that cilantro question, next slide. You can Google IFAS and cilantro, and you'll find a lot of different sources of information. But like for instance, this UF IFAS Gardening Solutions Guide tells you about cilantro, how it grows, how to plant it, and that it's also the seeds become coriander and so forth. It tells you all about it and what conditions it likes. And the question about how do I keep it, from blooming or bolting? Bolting is the question. Well, there are some low bolt cultivars out there that don't bolt quite so fast, or slower bolting cultivars. But you're pretty much out of luck because you need to grow cilantro as an annual because in this hot temperatures that we have here in Florida, it will bolt up pretty quickly. In temperatures when they're a little cooler, it'll be slower to bolt up, but that's just part of cilantro. If you want to have it over an extended period of time, your best option is actually to plant seeds, and then 2 weeks later plant some more seeds, and then 2 weeks later you can plant a couple more. So you can spread out your availability of your cilantro by having a succession planting for it. So next. But that information is readily available there. This was actually part of that question they were asking about when to prune it and everything. Herbs are easy to, they like pruning generally. That document up above that I just showed you said you could prune cilantro from when it's 6 inches up, anytime after that. You want to tend, you want to have herbs you want to have available and harvest in small quantities over a period of time, and they tend to do well that when you pinch them or you cut them off. I wanted to show you this picture here. If you look at the left picture, you'll see where I did a prune on this plant, and below what you want to do is you want to prune above a node. A node is where the leaves and the stems come out. You want to prune above one of those nodes, and then what happens is that facilitates the branching out of the plant. And you can see here what happened once I pruned it is that below it, these stems and leaves all branched out there, so it made it bushy. And so that's something that pruning of herbs is a great thing because it does tend to make it bushier, and you want to have generally the leaves is what you're wanting to harvest. If you look on the right, the upper right is one that same plant that I pruned, the one on the left, and on the lower picture are plants that I did not, and you'll see they're a lot more upright and they have a lot less branching. Next. If you if you Google IFAS and vegetable gardening, you can find this document. And this is another IFAS document. This is publication SP 103. And this is for anybody that's growing vegetables here in Florida. This is a wonderful, wonderful guide for you. It's free. You can download it. You can print it out. It's a great guide. Has all sorts of great information. If you go to the next slide. For example, it has a full set of it has gosh, I'm trying to think of the it has a bunch of in the appendices. They have a bunch of charts that show a lot of great information on the various vegetables. Like for instance, you can see for lettuce, there was a question about growing lettuce. Well, you'll see in North Florida that you should be planting lettuce seeds between January, February, and September and October. So they're cool weather vegetables. So you want to really grow them when the temperature is cooler. They take 60 to 80 days to harvest. So if you figure 80 days, it's almost 3 months, February, March, April, May. We're really at the end of lettuce. So so that's not something you would want to plant seeds right now. However, if you like okra, you can see here that in North Florida, March through June is the time to plant them. And you got 60 to 70 days of harvest after that. And it has your spacing. It has all, the planting depth. Lots of great information there. So, and they have this for, all sorts of vegetables. I mean, it just goes on and on. So next. They then have another chart at the end that for each of these different vegetables, they have some suggested cultivars or particular varieties that you may want to choose. Like, for instance, if you're planting okra right now, because it's the time to plant okra, you may want to choose Clemson Spineless or Annie Oakley 2 or Cajun Delights are really good ones, and it gives you some helpful information. Like for here, you want to soak the seeds in water for 6 hours for better germination. Require warm soils and temperatures, which is why you plant it during the summertime, very heat tolerant and so forth. So this publication is right there. All of y'all have access to it. Next. So in answering this, let's see, make sure I got this. Advice on growing herbs and when and how to prune them. There's a lot of herbs that grow really great here. Basil, rosemary, thyme, mint. Those are all chives. They all do really well here. Rosemary is my favorite. I love rosemary. And if you look at this picture here, you can see 2 different types of rosemary are actually planted here in the landscape. And they've trimmed them to, the upper one is an upright rosemary. They've trimmed it to a shrub. And then they have one that is kind of a weepy, a draping type that drapes over. And so, I thought that was very neat how they did that. But the draping ones are really great for over on pots. They'll drape over the side, and they can be very attractive. And rosemary is evergreen. It's there all year long. You can grow it in pots well. They like well-drained soils. You don't want them to be too wet, so making sure they don't stay wet. They want to have very, very well-drained soils. So rosemary is my favorite, and I love the taste of rosemary. So evergreen, you can, like this hedge where you trimmed it hard, you can trim them. You've seen them trimmed into Christmas trees and made into wreaths and other things like that. They take pruning well. So rosemary is my favorite because it is evergreen and all those other reasons. But I said oregano, basil, all of those grow well. They have their own growing conditions. And I would really suggest that if you just Google IFAS and then basil, or IFAS and thyme, or IFAS and chives, it'll give you all sorts of great info on how to grow it. So, because they are all different. The only other one I'll give you a warning of, if you're, is mint. Mint is very aggressive. It grows very fast. It tends to like moisture conditions. But mint can take over a garden. So I really highly recommend that you grow mint in a pot and you keep it controlled. Let's see, I talked about how to keep cilantro alive, and you don't grow it as an annual. Interesting growing veggies in pots, so you can move them. I said you can grow most vegetables in pots. The thing is that they all have their different seasons, and I don't know one that produces all the time anyways, but you can get some that have longer seasons. And if you go Google, like for instance, strawberries, IFIS and strawberries, they'll have a document there that will talk to you about the different varieties and what the best ones are and their different qualities, and you can pick the ones that meet what you're looking for. Next, fruits. So you had some questions about growing fruits. One person has a Myers lemon in a pot, and they eventually want to plant it. What care do they need? Does it need cover during winter months? Myers lemon trees need protection below 20 degrees. They are cold hardy up to 20, and as I mentioned earlier, our average low for the year is between 20 and 25 degrees. So most years they're fine and they won't need protection. If we do get a really, really cold snap though, you may want to cover it with blankets or do something to protect it. And so that you do need to watch. Let's see. So cover it during colder months. Planting it, you can actually keep it in the pot for a long time. You may want to get bigger pots, but if you every couple of years, if you want to take it out of the pot and prune the top and prune the roots around the edges, where if they start going around the outside, you can actually extend them in pots for a longer period of time. Let's see. And we have some really awesome other fruits, like the pomegranate in this picture, and the figs that do really well and are very, very cold hardy here. Oh, next. Container gardening. Now, I had a lot of questions on container gardening. Had how to treat insects on potted plants, spider mites, mealybugs, aphids. Generally, you want to use the least harsh treatment that you can, and there are some, hand picking off a lot of things is actually a good way to do things. There are some, if you can't do that, there are insecticidal soaps that you can use, and there are some homemade things you can do with dishwasher detergent with a little bit of oil. You can do that. And again, you can go IFIS and spider mites, and they'll have all sorts of great information on how to get rid of them, or mealybugs or aphids. Some of the, most of these are actually fairly easy to get rid of. Spider mites may be a little harder, but they do have that information there. And you want to make sure you always follow, if you use an insecticide, always follow the instructions on the label. Soils, what to do for container planting, any way to get away from composting. Well, you don't have to actually do the composting yourself, but a lot of the soils, what you want for containers are something that has some organic matter generally, and then you don't want some too heavy and too harsh of a soil. So you want to have a blend that may have some organic matter, maybe some sand, maybe some perlite or something if you want it to be a lighter mix. It really depends on what you're growing. And I did have a question. Everybody take notes on what your questions are, and we do have time at the end that I can answer questions. So take your notes, and I will be glad to answer them at the end. I just wanted to make sure I have lots of information here, so I want to make sure I can cover it all, and then we'll go to questions. So soils, if you're growing cactus, you're going to have a total different mix than you would if you're having a bog garden or something that likes a lot of moisture. So you'll vary according to what you're growing, what the soil that you're using. And there are some mixes out there, some, more like this, if you are growing a cactus mix or if you're growing a general orchids or different things like that. You have a balcony and receive full afternoon sun. What types of plants thrive in this heat? Well, we have a lot of them that thrive in this heat because we have this heat, and a lot of our natives specifically will do well in this heat, and a lot of the more tropical plants. I'm going to give you a reference where you can find out what would grow really well in this condition, and at the end I will tell you about some of those. So I'll give you that. That's a follow-on answer there. And are there some foolproof container plants that require little maintenance? The main thing with this is to make sure that when you plant them, that you plant them in the conditions that they thrive, and that'll be your less maintenance. And probably the ones that will have the minimum maintenance would be the plants that don't require a whole lot of watering, which those are a lot of the cactuses and succulents and maybe some palms and some things like that, or the ones that require a lot of water that you can put in a condition where it's not well drained, and like some of the bog gardens and stuff, they require very little maintenance. But planting the right plant in the right place is actually your best thing you can do to make sure you minimize your maintenance. So if you plant it in the soil conditions that it likes, and have a pot set up so that it either drains well if that's what the plant likes, or it maintains the water if it likes more moisture. Having that all done ahead of time will save you a lot of maintenance. Next. So why would you garden with containers? That's my question. There's a lot of reasons why, and y'all are, you may have to have lack of garden space, or you don't want to dig up an area that you're renting. Is a good reason. Your garden space may have a lot of like shells or something that makes it hard to garden in that area. And so having pots may be a solution there to be able to garden more easily. You may want to have portability, where you may want to move your pots around for different seasons. You may want to move them around as different things bloom. You may want to move them around as conditions change. Like, for instance, when it gets colder, you may want to move plants that are not cold hardy into the garage or somewhere that's protected. In pots, you can control what soil's in there. Once again, you may have really bad soil or outside that it's hard to garden in. You can put whatever soil mix you want in your pot. You can control your moisture, light, move them wherever the light conditions they do the best. I said in temperature, you can move them if the temperature is such that they're not doing well. It also lifts the height of the plants, and that's a good thing. It can make it up and bring it up to the height where you can see flowers better, or you can see the vegetables. It can bring it up to the height where it's easier for people as we get older. It's harder to bend down, so it can make it so that it's easier to garden. So that's another reason. And then pots can be very, very attractive. There's some beautiful pots out there, and you can really arrange things to be attractive. The one on the left are my pots, and I'm into the plants and not so much the arrangement part of things. And as you can see, that's not the most attractive of arrangements, but the plants are happy and healthy, and those are the ones I brought out of my garage because they were cold hardy, or they're not cold hardy. I have a mango tree and that hibiscus and some orchids and things like that I took in. So those are the ones that I take in and out, and that's the reason I keep them in pots. The one on the right is an example of a vegetable garden that can be done in a container, and it brings it up higher so it's easier to pick and tend. Next. Containers come in many shapes and sizes. You can have, like the upper left, you have that simple wooden container. But wood is, it tends to rot and such, and you may actually have a container in a container for that case would be the thing to have there so that the wood doesn't last longer. You have a formal on the container arrangement and container in the lower left. In the middle, you have a very extravagant raised bed. I want one of these. Yeah, that was raised up and they're using for vegetable gardens. You could use a small, there's a core container in the upper right, and somebody used a whimsical, used a toilet on the lower right. I saw that and I thought, that's interesting. But you can use almost anything that can hold soil as a container, and but you want to make sure you choose it for the right plants for those containers. Next. So selecting a container, what you want to consider are the drainage is one of the most key things. Different pots, drainage, I think in my experience, most of the things that kill most plants are overwatering or too much water. So you need to make sure that you consider the drainage, and having pots that have holes in the bottom is generally something that you need to watch out for. You may want to supplement that drainage for things that like to have well-drained conditions. You want to have a soil that mix that's well-drained. You may want to add like rocks or I think I've heard people adding peanuts, and even people with big pots, I've heard of things like adding plastic bottles in the bottom of it before they add the soil that facilitates drainage. They want to have it in a tray underneath it that you may actually want to have rocks or something to raise it up so you further facilitate the drainage. In the center pot there, you have a ceramic pot that has its own built-in tray to help with the drainage and holding the water, keeping it off the ground. I mentioned the upper, the core upper right pot. They actually have a pot in the pot because of the outside. It disintegrates quickly, and so that saves that. But they use it, I think, for the looks and attractiveness. And you have real formal raised ones like the one that's on the lower right. There's just all sorts of different options. But consider the drainage. Consider the material. Hard materials such as metal or the ceramic that doesn't allow the water to dissipate, let's say plastic, ceramic, those hold the water in better. Those like are normal the terracotta pots, or if you had the core upper right one, those you tend to have water evaporating out the sides also, and so they tend to dry quickly, and so you may have to water more if you have that type of container. Size is important. You want to have it in the scale of what you're planting. The bigger it is, generally the less you have to water. The smaller it is, generally the more you have to water because it tends to evaporate or lose the water quickly. Shape, flatter things tend to require more watering, and it doesn't tend to have more root. Things that are more upright tend to have more room for the roots, so you want to know what you're having. Flat ones tend to not allow space for the roots and tend to need more watering. And you want to consider weight. That plastic container weighs a whole heck of a lot less than that terracotta one or that ceramic one. And you can do some little tricks, as I mentioned, like adding the bottles or some peanuts, the shipping peanuts to the bottom to get the weight down a little bit. There are some options like that, but you want to consider that if you are physically going to move your material is important. Next. Let's see. So if you're planting a pot, you can do single plants within a pot, like in these examples here. You've got a palm, and you've got a grass, and these are. And then you have the succulents over there. So you have these options that you can do just a single plant. It makes a nice statement, and especially if you put it in a really nice pot. The lower right ones are used as a dramatic entrance way. Next. But then you can also do multiple plants in one container. If you're doing this, though, what you need to do is make sure that the plants have similar requirements. You don't want one plant in the pot that likes regular moisture, another one that likes drier conditions. And you need to make sure they have similar fertilization requirements, similar light requirements, and you have to make sure they have similar growth rate too. If you have one that grows really, really fast, it can take over and the whole entire pot, and you lose the other plants. Next. This I went to Tallahassee this last weekend, and I went to a nursery over there, and they had this. I just thought it was so pretty here, just showing you that, I mean, there's some really pretty pots out there, and this one they put some sort of a little small plant that's kind of weeping over, and then they had agapanthus in the top. But if you want to make a statement, that makes a statement. Next. But when you're designing your containers, you want to consider the colors, the textures, and the growth habit. Just one general way that you can tend to make a pot attractive is by having various textures and these habits. And one thing I've heard is that you can incorporate a thriller, a filler, and a spiller. And the thriller in here is something that immediately catches your attention and has a big impact, and that would be the upright grass in this case. And then you have some perennials that are your filler, and then you've got your spiller, you've got the yellow flowering planters, your spiller that flows over, and it tends to break the harsh lines of the pot, and that whole composition is very attractive. Next. And here's some other examples showing the thrillers, fillers, and spillers. And I think they used to list them as a spiller here, and petunias and other flowers as your fillers, and a palm as your thriller, and the one on the left, and the one on the right has a palm also, and then different variety of plants. And the one on the left is real bright, and it's got a lot of the bright, hot colors, and the one on the right is more of a soothing, cooler colors. They're both of them I thought were very attractive containers. Next. This I liked. The plant in this one, your thriller is actually a pepper plant in this one. And I thought that was pretty neat that they actually had a really nice pepper plant. And it had peppers in it that was growing in this container. And then they had some herbs and some petunias. Next. When you have multiple containers, you may want to consider if you grouping them attractively. You may want to consider having pots of the same materials or the same colors or same styles. You can have the same shapes and different sizes and such, but something to tie them in together will make them attractive. Next. Another way you can make them attractive is having similar type colors or similar plants within the pots. Like and here they had some with different bromeliads that are placed in here. I thought both of these are very attractive. Next. But when you're deciding what you want to put in your container, there is another really wonderful free guide that you can bring to bear. And this is for your container or your yard. It's applicable. This is the Florida Friendly Landscaping Guide to Plant Selection and Landscape Design. And this is free. You can go to this This link up above, it's free online, and you can access it whenever or download it if you want to. But it has a lot of great information. Next. So they'll have information like large trees, small trees, shrubs, perennials, annual vines. They have the, different sections according to what you're looking for. And this is an excerpt that I took out. This was from the perennial guide. And this just gives you an example of the type of information they have in there. So it tells you its range, if it's north, central, or south Florida, what its zone is. So if you look at the, let's look at the Rudbeckia fulgida, the one on the left there. You see it grows well in north and central Florida, zones 8 and 9. It has next is a native. So a lot of, I'll talk a little bit about natives here in a moment, but natives are important to our wildlife, and a lot of people want to know if things are native. And here it does tell you if it is. It tells you its growth rate, its height, eventual height and eventual width, what type of soil. This is a medium, you know, one side it's alkaline, another is acidic. This is kind of a medium soil mix. Let's see, TXT. I don't remember what that is. Anyways, I have to look that up. I don't remember that. The soil, that half of a raindrop thing is that likes moderate moisture conditions. If it doesn't have anything in it, it likes dry conditions. If it's all black, then it likes moist conditions. So it likes this one likes moderate moisture. It does best in sun, but also will work in part sun conditions. This guide also has, somebody had asked a question about plants growing in salt conditions. This one tells you if a plant has low or no or moderate or high salt tolerances in here too. So you can look in here and it will tell you plants that have a high salt tolerance. It also gives you information of whether these plants have wildlife value, if the butterflies like them, if the host plants, if the birds like them, if hummingbirds like them. So this is a great guide that you can look at and just look at the range, things that are in the 8-9 range, and what your conditions are, your sun, what you're looking for. It's got a lot of great information. Next. Potentially harmful plants. Are there common plants or shrubs in the area that we need to be on the lookout while gardening in our yard or out for walks that are harmful to us or pets, like poison ivy? Yes, next slide. Poison ivy. You definitely need to watch out for poison ivy. It is around here. I've got it in my yard. I still get it because we have woods nearby, and the birds eat the berries and they drop them in my yard, and so I still get them. They pop up, and you have to watch out for poison ivy. It grows on the ground like the one on the right, but sometimes it also grows up into the trees, and I've actually seen people put their hand on a side of a tree, not realizing that the lower that vine that they were putting their hand on was a poison ivy vine. That was, if you looked up further, you could see the poison ivy growing there. So watch out for poison ivy. A lot of people react very badly to it and get a rash, and sometimes it can be a severe rash. And I'm one of those people that react badly to poison ivy. So I'm always out on the lookout for those three leaves there whenever I'm out, especially out in the woods somewhere. Next. This is one that a lot of people don't know about, and this is one that I had growing in my yard when I first moved here, and I'd never seen it before, didn't know what it was, and I pulled it out, and oh gosh, this is one of the worst stings. They have these little, small, minute stinging hairs on them that just sting and sting and sting. They hurt. This one really hurts bad. So be on the lookout. It has pretty little flower. Don't pick it. So watch out. It also grows a lot on, you'll see it on paths if you're doing trails and everything. So if you're doing trails and you're in sandals, be careful. Watch out that you don't push up against it, because it really hurts. Next. Smilax is another one that you tend to get in a lot of our yards here, and they grow in a lot of different habitats. This one, be aware because it has these thorns through it, and it's fairly common. So you just need to watch out because I've been stung, or well, they don't see. I've been hurt by or punctured, had them puncturing my skin multiple times. A couple other things I didn't put slides on here that you may want to watch out for is a lot of our palmettos. If you've noticed the saw palmettos, they have these saws along the stems, and they can really hurt if you don't watch those when you're gardening. And another thing that we were talking about earlier is that the sand spurs is something else that we have in our area that you have to watch out for. And it's a small low grass that they get the seeds have these little spikes on them that attach to clothing and to pets and such. So watch out for those too. That's another thing. Next. Are there any tips to trimming flowering bushes or palm trees? Okay, I mentioned earlier we talked about pruning to make something bushy. So sometimes you want to prune to have a bush to branch out. And what you would want to do is prune above a node that you want it to branch out. And if you want it to branch out, if you look at that node, where it's on in the stem, whatever direction that node is where that branch will come out. So if you want to encourage something to grow outward, you cut above that node, the node of a node that's facing outward. So that's just a general pruning for pruning. As far as when you prune and what you prune, generally, like for instance azaleas, and you may want to prune soon after the plant blooms, because if you wait till later on, you're cutting off the buds of the flowers from the next year. So you want to prune what you're going to prune soon after it flowers, generally for flowering bushes. There are some plants though that grow they flower on older wood, and there's actually, if you look at the hydrangeas, that's why I put a picture here. The paniculata here, this one grows on new foliage. So, trimming this right afterwards is great, and then it'll grow new foliage and it'll bloom off of that. But there's another type of hydrangea that blooms off of older stems, and this one you don't want to trim it too far, or you're pruning out next year's flowers. So you need to consider that as far as don't prune more than I'd say at a time of a third of the plant as max. Some things do take pruning better than others, but you do want to make sure you leave enough leaves and such so that it maintains, stays healthy, because they get their nutrients from their leaves. They require those, and so you don't want to prune too much off at one time. Other things with pruning, a lot of times you will prune to take out diseased branches, and sometimes you'll take out branches that are crossing one another, because they'll rub and they'll end up cause a site that insects and diseases can form in. So you don't want things rubbing against one another, crossing. As far as palms go, that palm that in the background in the right picture, that's really how a palm should be pruned. And if you look at, think of a clock at a 3 o'clock and 9 o'clock position, you want your fronds all to be like around to down to that level. And you want the reason is, and I see people, they cut their palms so there's only a few fronds up at the top. What you're doing there is really those palms need those leaves for bringing in nutrition, and you're hurting the long-term health of the palm when you do those severe cuts like that. So IFIS does not recommend you doing those cuts. Really, when you're pruning palms, you should only be pruning off the brown is what you should be pruning off, is just the brown. and it's for the health of the palm. Next. Let's see, miscellaneous other things. Let's see. We live close to the Gulf. The salty air affects the growth of plants. Yes, and that's where that guide I talked to you about is a good option for picking some plants. You definitely need to consider salt tolerance. The closer you are to salt water, if they're in there's actually two things you need to concern yourself. If you're in danger of being inundated during tropical storms, you'll have needs to be more salt tolerant versus if you live a ways off and you have to worry about like the salt spray is what you're concerned about. So some plants may tolerate one or not the other. But salt air is important, or salt tolerance is important. We have a lot of great salt-tolerant plants. I live not far from the bay, and some good options. If you consider the native plants that grow near the saltwater, railroad vine, June sunflower. Actually, fig trees are actually fairly salt tolerant. Bottle brushes are fairly salt tolerant. There are a lot of different options, so you can look for those. Let's see, what type of soil and fertilizer should I be using when planting palms and native plants in a front garden? The location's a mix of sandy soil and seashells. Well, generally you don't want to amend the soils that you're digging in. Generally, you want to plant the right plant that likes that condition. And fortunately, there's a lot of conditions that where sandy soil, a lot of native plants and such that they like this condition because they developed in it. So picking the plants that in the wild and in nature grow in those conditions in the first place is the best thing. The reason they really don't want you to amend the soil too much is because if you only have a small area, really good, rich soil, and you plant a plant in that area, the roots tend to then want to stay there. They don't want to go out into that harsh, awful soil out to the side. And so you really don't want to amend unless you can amend the whole entire big area, which that would be a heck of a job. You could do it if you want to, I guess. But I think plant selection is your best bet there. Container gardening is a good way. That's one of the conditions you may want to do containers so that you can put a different type of soil in that container and grow in it. What are the best garden centers, nurseries, and online sellers? Well, since I'm talking to you as a master gardener, I can't tell you specific things because we're not supposed to promote any particular brand or place. Generally, though, nurseries that the local nurseries can make sure that you get more plants that are from our area that might grow in this area. The bigger box stores may or may not, depending on how good of a person they have doing their plant selection and where they're buying their plants from. A lot of the smaller nurseries will actually, if you ask them for a specific plant, will work to try to find that plant for you. Sometimes, I like native plants. I'm really big into native plants, and so I tend to go to there's like native nurseries in Tallahassee, and there's Seven Pines and Defuniak Springs. So I go to some of the native plant nurseries that are around. Online sellers, I'm really not sure of one I can recommend on that. As I said, we're not supposed to really promote any. So best bet is the local garden centers. How to care for hibiscus and mandevilla. I kind of talked about the hibiscus earlier, and you may want to Google iphis and hibiscus, but we have native ones that it's very easy, minimal care, that are cold hardy, and then you have some that you will have to bring in or cover or take care of because they aren't cold hardy. Some will die back to the ground naturally as part of the life cycle. Some will die back to the ground because they get burnt back by the cold. So there's different ones. There's a wide variety of hibiscus. So that one you'll need to research your specific one. But there's a lot of great native ones. So mandevillas, that's another it's a vine, and those tend to not be super cold hardy, so you probably will want to generally grow it as an annual. But they're real pretty, and you can use them a lot. Once again, I would just Google mandevilla, and it will tell you the conditions it likes. They like sun, well-drained soil, and so forth. Let's see. Next, consider using native plants. They're adapted to our environment. Reasons you would do it, they thrived here before we had people taking care of them. They didn't need people watering them. They didn't need people moving them in and out of the garage when it got cold. They didn't need their soils amended because they like these soils. They're adapted to them. And because of that, native plants can be a lot less maintenance and can require less water fertilizing and soil amendment if you plant the right native plant in the right place. We have native plants that are bog plants. We have native plants that grow in the hot, sunny, sandy, near the dune area. And if you plant one of those plants in the conditions of the other, it won't do well. So you need to make sure you plant the plants that grow in the conditions similar to your yard or your pot or whatever you're growing in. Native plants provide food and habitat for our native wildlife, and this is the biggest reason I'm a proponent for native plants, because our whole ecosystem depends on the natives. That's what our wildlife developed with, and we want to promote a diversity of native plants so that we have the diversity of native wildlife. Next. And just as an example, most people know that monarch butterflies need milkweed as their host plant. We have a bunch of, I think we have like 18 or 19 native milkweeds, and the butterflies use these as their host plant, where that's the only thing that they lay their eggs on, and their caterpillars hatch, and they eat milkweed, and that's all they eat, and they need that milkweed. Well, what a lot of people don't realize is that other butterflies and other moths and other insects, they all have their own different host plants. And some of them have, several host plants, or a lot of them. Some of them have just one particular host plant. And by having a variety of natives there, you're able to promote a lot of the different insects and butterflies and such. So, for instance, if you want to promote having, let's say, the zebra longwing, our state butterfly here, you need to have passion flower vines in your garden. Or if you want to have the black swallowtail, you may want, there's different ones that have different native plants that they use it for their host plants. So I do promote planting native plants because without these plants, you don't have the butterflies, you don't have the insects, and then you don't have the birds, and then you don't have the other animals and such that require these plants and such. Next. And as I said, we all depend on insects. Next. So I'm going to end here with just some great options for our area. Next. These are some of my favorite plants, and they're all native plants actually, but ones that I thought you might want to consider. Redbud's a native that grows 20, 30 feet tall. It's a small tree that, a lot of people can have room for these. And there are some smaller cultivars out there. The bees love their flowers, and they're used for honey. Seeds are eaten by the birds, so the birds enjoy them also. They have these attractive heart-shaped leaves, and in the springtime, they flower before the leaves come out, and they're beautiful. I just love them. Next. Fringe trees, another of my favorite native plants. This one gets 12 to 20 feet tall. The Redbud I just mentioned is deciduous, so it does leave its leaves in the wintertime. And this one is also deciduous. It grows in part shade to full sun conditions. It's drought tolerant. Has these beautiful white flowers in the spring. It has yellow fall foliage. It has fruits that the birds enjoy, and makes a really pretty small specimen tree. Next. Dahoon holly. This is one of our native hollies, and we have several of them, Dahoons and East Palatka, Savannah, and so forth, that are beautiful holly trees. They're evergreen. They have these red berries in the wintertime. This one likes more medium drain to wet soils. There's some that like drier soils. They have the white flowers that the pollinators enjoy. They have red berries that the birds love. I have one out in my yard that in the wintertime, early spring, you'll have the cedar waxwings come in, and I'll have lots of berries, and then they'll come in and they just go in, and I won't have any berries, but they just flock in there and they have a blast. They party. Next. Beautyberry. I love beautyberry. This is a shrub that gets only 6 to 8 feet. It's deciduous. It has these beautiful purple berries. I love them. It has yellow fall foliage before it loses its leaves. This guy can be pruned into like a small tree form, or you keep it in the shrub form. But these berries are beautiful. Birds like the berries. You can actually make a jelly out of the berries. Actually, people I've seen have had beautyberry jelly. Next, oak leaf hydrangea. This is one of my favorite shrubs. It has the white flowers. They're flowering right now in my garden. They kind of dry up, and they have kind of a bronzy pink color flower panicles are left on it that last for a long time. And it's got these really nice, coarse, big leaves that add a neat accent texture to your garden. I really like these. Next. And then we have the coontie, which is a cycad. It gets to be height of 3 feet, spread of 4 feet. This guy's evergreen. It's a beautiful little shrub. There's full sun to shade. It's got good salt tolerance. So people that like sun, salt tolerant, this is a good one. It is a butterfly larval plant for the tala butterfly, but we don't have them here. They're south central butterfly. And then we have coral honeysuckle, which is a wonderful vine. It's my favorite vine. It's evergreen. It has these orange flowers and that turn into berries that the birds really enjoy. Hummingbirds love the flowers. Other birds like the seeds. It's evergreen. It's a well-behaved vine. Next. And then there's passion flower vines, which I would recommend growing these in pots. If you're growing one of these, do like a little trellis support for a vine and put it in a pot. It has these beautiful purple flowers. It is the host plant for the zebra longwing, as well as the Gulf fritillary and 1 or 2 other butterflies. It's salt tolerant. The reason I said you might want to use it in a pot is that it does tend to send out suckers out to the side, so that it'll pop up different places in your yard, and you may not want to have that. So consider putting it in a pot. And next, muley grass is a real attractive native grass. It has late summer these pinkish flowers on them, and it can be really pretty in a pot as an accent and in your yard. Drought tolerant, once established, wide range of soils, sun to part shade, easy to grow. Next. Beach sunflower, love this one. For those, again, that are, this one's salt tolerant, like sun, well-drained, sandy soils, it will bloom and bloom and bloom and bloom and bloom and bloom. It will bloom until we get a hard freeze, and then it'll stop blooming for a little while. But it may actually die back to the ground. If we have a good freeze, it will die. So sometimes you may want to grow this as an annual, or you'll have to grow it more as an annual in a really cold winter time. But it's a wonderful free-flowering, and it kind of goes along the ground. This is one I recommend for pots and beach areas. Next. Blanket flower is another perennial that sometimes it's a short-lived perennial, so a lot of times people grow it more as an annual. It'll self-seed, and you'll get a lot more of these. But this one will go, again, in full sun, dry, well-drained conditions, and is very salt-tolerant. Next. Black-eyed Susans. There's a lot of different Rebeckias out there. They vary from being annuals to short-lived perennials. They have a lot of flowers on them. They're adaptable, full sun to part shade conditions generally. My favorite's a lance leaf Rebeckia, which is the top left pictures. Rebeckia lacinata. It's really a wonderful perennial. Next. Goldenrod. I love goldenrod, and goldenrod is not the thing that causes your allergies. It's actually the ragwort, or the ragweed, that blooms at the same time. But the goldenrod is the showy one, so it gets all the blame. There's a lot of different native goldenrods. Their pollen is too heavy. It's not wind blown over, so it is a wonderful, beautiful perennial. Pollinators love it. Some of them do tend to colonize and spread out, so you may want to watch that. Next. And then Stokefaster. I love, this is one of my favorite perennials again. This one will stay mostly evergreen, so it has a nice clump. It's very well behaved. One is 2 feet, and then has these beautiful, about 3 to 4 inch bluish purple flowers. They're beautiful. Next. And so that's the end of my formal presentation. And we have many plant options and many ways you can garden. So I just want to encourage you to go out and try some and have fun. Oh, I do have references too. So if y'all are interested in following up on some of that, that one publication on vegetable gardening, I've got it listed here. Got some for growing fruit crops in containers and container gardens for outdoor spaces, and one on native plants and their benefit for native wildlife in the Florida Panhandle. So I think those are all useful documents that I like a lot, and also that plant selection guide. So with that, I will open up to questions.
Hey, thanks, Jody. So there's a couple of questions that we have in our chat.
Awesome.
So the first one was, when the suggestion on the plant tag says 6 to 8 hours of sun, should we maybe keep it in the sun for less time since the sun is so hot here?
You may, yes, and you may want to consider where the sun is throughout the day and planting it somewhere that it gets shade for part of the day. And also, if you're on the high end there, afternoon sun is harsher on the plants than morning sun. So if you have a place that can plant it has more of the morning sun versus the afternoon, you can go with plants that are more toward the lower hours of sunlight.
Great, thank you. Another one is, if annuals got too much sun and some of the leaves die, what are the chances they will come back if they are put in the shade and watered?
It depends how many leaves die, and they may or may not. So you can just give it a try. That's you never know on that one. Sometimes once they're hit pretty hard, they don't come back, but sometimes they do.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
One more, is there a one-pager with all of the plants, including pictures, of plants we want to not touch on trail walks?
I haven't seen that actually. That would be a neat thing to put together actually. I don't know. That would be something you could maybe you could Google IFAS and hazardous plants or something and see if there is something, but I don't think there is, unfortunately. But that does sound like something that would be a good thing to put together.
Awesome.
So I might consider pulling that together.
Okay, could you let us know if and when that happens?
We'll put it out.
Okay, perfect.
I'll suggest that.
Thank you. We appreciate that.
Yeah. That's here. Let me write that down because that might be a good thing to. I like that idea. Just a one-pager of trail hazard plants. Yeah. Yeah, I like that.
Okay, great. And so are there any flowers that will promote birds? Plant flowers next to my bird feeder, maybe?
Oh, yes, definitely. There are a lot of different ones. And in that one document that I showed you for plant selection, you know, the ones that, if it has a little bird symbol on the lower part of it, it's one that is attractive to birds. And they're actually, again, if you Google IFAS and birds, there are articles on attracting birds, and they go into a lot of different things because attracting birds is more, it has to do with what plants you have, what cover you have. You have to have room for them, you know, what birds you want to attract, because some of them have different conditions that they like to live in. You have to have a water source for them, like bird baths can bring them in too. Having plants that produce berries are good for wintertime and for a lot of our seasonal migrants. Plants supporting insects. That's actually a big key thing for birds, is that something like 95% of our birds, or 98 or something like that, feed their young insects, and having plants that have insects are host to insects is something that's important. So a lot of these people that they spray and kill all the insects in your area, that's not good for your birds either. So that's something that you may want to consider.
Okay, thank you. And the final question that's in the chat is, if my aloe vera plant has turned brown, can those leaves turn green again?
No. I don't think so.
Okay, sounds good.
Oh no, I'm sorry. No, if they've died, and they're, you know, where they're brown and they don't have the moisture in them anymore, or they're, you know, no. I hope you can save the rest of it.
All right, so that's all the questions in the chat. If anybody has any further questions for Jody, feel free to unmute yourself and go ahead. We have about 10 more minutes.
Yeah, I'd like to see everybody too.
Okay, so camera's back on then?
Yeah.